Marcus Ellington had built his life on discipline, vision, and a refusal to ever let anyone place limits on who he could become, yet even with his billions in the bank, his ownership of one of the most advanced tech companies in America, and his sprawling real estate portfolio that spanned from penthouses in Manhattan to luxury resorts in Dubai, there were still moments when the world seemed determined to remind him that success, no matter how dazzling, could not shield him from the ignorance and arrogance of those who saw only the color of his skin. And this truth came crashing down on a Friday evening when Marcus, weary from a week of high-stakes negotiations with investors from Singapore, returned to his oceanfront villa, a secluded property perched high on a cliffside overlooking waves that rolled endlessly into the horizon, a place he had designed as a sanctuary of peace, with marble floors imported from Italy, hand-carved oak doors that towered 10 feet high, infinity pools that shimmered under the sun, and gardens tended by the best landscapers in California. Yet as his sleek black Mercedes S-Class approached the ornate iron gates of the estate, his expectation of tranquility was shattered by the hostile glare of 2 uniformed security guards who stepped into the path of his car with arms raised, palms out, and an arrogance that instantly triggered something deep inside Marcus. Because these men weren't strangers on the street, they were supposed to be the ones protecting his home, men hired through the local management company contracted to run the villa's security operations, and yet instead of offering him the respect due to the owner, they peered into the tinted glass with suspicion, as if daring him to prove he belonged. Marcus rolled down his window with calm dignity, introducing himself clearly as Marcus Ellington, the owner of this property, his voice steady, expecting at once that the guards would nod, apologize, and allow him entry, but instead, the taller of the 2 chuckled dryly, shaking his head with a condescending smirk. "Sir, this is private property, and we don't allow solicitors or random drivers up this road." His words dripping with disdain as the second guard, a stockier man with a crew cut and a sneer that carried centuries of prejudice, leaned forward and spat out, "I don't care what you say, there's no way someone like you owns a place like this. Turn the car around before we call the cops." And though Marcus had endured years of subtle slights in boardrooms and boardwalks, in 5-star hotels and country clubs where he was mistaken for the chauffeur or the help, this one struck different, because this wasn't just ignorance in a stranger's eyes, this was his own hired security standing on his land denying his right to be there, treating him as though his wealth, his status, his achievements were all an illusion simply because he didn't fit the narrow image in their minds of who could command such luxury. His heart thudded, anger searing through his veins, but he steadied himself, remembering the advice of his late father, a man who had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. "Son, when they test your worth, never shout. Prove it so loud they choke on their doubt." And so Marcus inhaled deeply, keeping his voice calm as he asked them to check the registry of property owners, to simply make a call to their supervisor, to look at the deed, but instead of taking the professional route, the men puffed up their chests, emboldened by each other's presence, the taller one saying, "We don't need to check anything, we know who belongs here, and it's not you," while the stockier one pulled out his radio as though he were preparing to summon reinforcements, threatening, "You've got 30 seconds to turn around before we call this in." And for a split second, Marcus considered simply driving through the gates. After all, they opened with a code only he possessed, a code tied to his biometric fingerprint system. But he stopped himself, because this wasn't about convenience anymore, this was about principle, about standing tall not just for himself but for every young black man who dreamed of owning something and was told it wasn't possible. So instead, Marcus pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, dialing his assistant, Jasmine, who within 10 minutes arrived in a silver SUV behind him, stepping out in heels and a navy blue suit, holding a leather folder so thick it could have doubled as a weapon. And with the cold precision of someone who had handled 1,000 hostile negotiations, she marched up to the guards, snapped open the folder, and shoved the title deed, proof of ownership, and corporate registration documents into their stunned faces, her voice cutting like glass. "This is Mr. Ellington, the sole owner of this estate, and the fact that you dared stop him at his own gate shows a level of incompetence that will cost you your jobs before the hour is over." But instead of swallowing their pride, the guard stammered weak excuses, muttering about mistaken identity, and just doing our jobs, one even mumbling an apology so hollow it only fueled Marcus's fury, because he knew what this was. It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't confusion, it was the same old poison of prejudice. Dressed up as authority, and he had no intention of allowing it to fester on his property, so, in one fluid motion, he stepped out of his car, his tailored charcoal suit catching the golden glow of the setting sun, his 6'3" frame towering over the guards, and in a voice deep, calm, and final, he said, "You're both finished. Effective immediately, you are terminated. Hand over your radios and badges," his words carrying the weight of command that made even the most hardened board members fold, and though the men sputtered in shock, trying to argue, Marcus was already on his phone with the head of the security management firm, his voice a blade cutting through excuses, demanding not only that the two men be dismissed but that the firm's entire contract be terminated by midnight, their negligence and arrogance disqualifying them from ever again handling a property tied to his empire, and within the hour, new guards, his own hand-picked private security team flown in from his corporate headquarters, stood at the gate, disciplined, professional, and loyal, while the disgraced former guards were escorted off the property, stripped of authority, their humiliation as visible as the fear in their eyes when they realized they had just destroyed their livelihoods in the span of a single evening. Marcus, however, felt no triumph, no gloating satisfaction, for the incident only reminded him that the climb to success was never truly complete, that no matter how high he rose, there would always be those determined to drag him back down. But as he walked through the grand oak doors of his villa, the ocean breeze washing over him, he promised himself and the generations after him that the gate of his empire would never again be a place where his worth was questioned, for he had not only earned the right to stand there, he had built it brick by brick, against every doubt, every insult, and every wall, and he would tear down anyone foolish enough to stand in his way.